Hi, everybody. My name is Molly Haley, and our topic for debate is telehealth technology. Oh, shoot. I don't even have it sharing. 1 second. Oh, you can pause the recording.
Sorry.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our presentation. Our topic is telehealth technology threatens the future of special education and applied behavior analysis. My name is Molly Haley, and my fellow group members are Taylor Sather, Megan Workman, Lanisa Martz, and Danielle Ferguson. So I'll start with an overview of our points and counterpoints, which we'll be discussing. Then Danielle will be discussing our first point and counterpoint of parent training. Our points and counterpoints include parent training, treatment fidelity, telehealth versus in-person services, ethical concerns, and cultural and socioeconomic factors. Starting off with our first point and counterpoint is Danielle.
Hello. So most of the barriers like role-playing skills, observing practice, monitoring, implementation, fidelity, and collecting data are present when implementing ABA via telehealth. Due to these barriers, ABA is not as common as other services such as speech or psychiatry. Some parents are not able to receive in-person due to geographic location, cost shortage, or quality professionals, and COVID-19. Parent training is a viable option to remotely train parents to implement ABA at home. In a 2020 study with Bhutan et al., 3 parents of children with autism were trained using video conferencing to deliver a BST-based intervention. BST is a teaching procedure that involves use of instructions, modeling, rehearsal, role-playing, and feedback. These parents were taught to implement guidance to the teacher children's several self-care skills, such as washing their face, washing hands, and applying lotion. The study compared the results of the graduated guidance between just a written detailed instructions and training via FaceTime using an iPad. The BST training package via FaceTime, all of the parents implemented graduated guidance with near perfect fidelity. All of the children completed the target self-care skills with sustainably higher levels of accuracy and independence. The parents reported high levels of satisfaction with the telehealth online, and having parent involvement in the intervention scan promotes generalization and maintenance of child skills and is often more cost effective than purely therapist-based treatment intervention. The National Research Council has suggested a fundamental component of effective ASD intervention programs include parental involvement and training, both of which have been shown to reduce parental stress and increase optimism and reported leisure time. All of the children in this study had received ABA treatment from, I think it was 15 hours to 35 hours a week for over a year before, but they had never tried to teach them these skills, the self-care skills that they did in this one.
So it was in person that these clients were transitioning to telehealth and still had these good results? Okay.
But yeah, they never had these skills in their ABA program before. And the children were between, I think, 4 and 7. And so you could go to the next slide. I'll show you the data. It was a non-concurrent multiple baseline design across the parent-child dyads and across the self-care skills, which are right there. First, they got the baseline data, and then they got the data with the detailed written instructions, which was still not really high. And then the data with the BST training package that was delivered through telehealth on FaceTime. All of the skill levels maintained upward to near perfect. Laura, this last one, was the only one who engaged in problem behavior, and that was physical aggression. And via telehealth, the mom was taught to conduct constant prompt delay probe trials to better assess her progress in acquiring the self-care skills. And this alone provides preliminary evidence that a parent can be remotely taught to correctly implement constant prompt delay probe trial via telehealth.
I have a quick question.
Yeah,
Did it mention the level of functioning that
it
each
didn't.
did?
No. Actually, I looked back at it. It did not. But they had, I mean,
Just curious, that would be different if it had mentioned, you know, they were pretty high functioning versus if they tried it again with lower functioning.
yeah,
kids.
I mean, I would assume that they were pretty high functioning because the end of the study, I mean, they were doing it independently and like washing your hands, washing your face and applying lotion. You have to be pretty high functioning to do that at such a young age.
Right.
Good point. I think it'd be really interesting if the study like compared like not only like just like telehealth compared to like a client's previous project or progress with in-client services, but also comparing that to clients who have never experienced any sort of ABA services except for telehealth, because you know there's so much like history built in and even just like reinforcement with doing discrete trial or doing these programs already within ABA that I just wonder if that would have any sort of effect on that.
If you can go back to the okay. So I couldn't really find any cons, but I did find one article about with Fisher et al. And they studied several empirical studies that show that internet-based remote coaching by therapists or a combination can enhance parents' knowledge about confidence when delivering ABA. It positively impacts parents' mental health and produces significant changes in their child's behavior. This was a randomized control trial, and they basically had a test, a control group, an experimental group, and it included online e-learning models and role plays with feedback via telehealth. And the parents in the treatment and control group in the beginning showed low levels of correct skills in the pretest. And then post-test, the treatment group showed marked improvement and the control group showed no change, really small change. The only limitation that he was talking was that parents took a while to complete the e-learning modules at their own pace, which is understandable because, you know, they have other things to do other than just, you know, learning. But and then another limitation was that even though the parents were taught to conduct preference assessments and promote verbal behavior, there's not often someone that assesses the parent's competency in those areas. And then another Bowden et al. 2020 did a systematic review providing an update on current research pertaining to the use of telehealth and training in caregivers to implement behavior procedures. And one of the studies that I thought was really interesting, it was by Lindgren et al. In 2006, compared the outcomes of 3 groups of children who were provided home telehealth with a behavior analyst there. One was at a clinic with remote coaching, and then one was in the clinic with the ABA, one was in a clinic with remote coaching, and then one was at home with telehealth with the BA, and they all showed 90% of reduction in problem behavior, and there were no significant differences in problem behavior reduction amongst all 3 groups. So they all were basically the same in success. And then one more literature review said that telehealth did not meet quality indications, and that the authors of that review said that group design studies were overall weak or inadequate in quality. And she made a good point saying that issues with determining telehealth as weak it's not justifiable because telehealth itself is not an independent variable, but it is just a service delivery mechanism. And when you have no other choice, I mean,
yeah,
telehealth is better than nothing. So
yeah.
Okay, next, Megan will be talking about treatment fidelity.
Perfect. So one thing with telehealth is one thing we really want to look at is treatment fidelity. So the first question, what is treatment fidelity and why is it important? It can be defined as the accuracy of an administration of an intervention. So for our example with telehealth, we can say at the BCBA, we're training a parent or a caregiver on telehealth out. How accurately are the parents implementing this treatment across both parents, across other caregivers, across environments, and then also across time? One issue we thought of is like, how accurate is this being implemented when it's over video conferencing? For example, if we're doing behavioral skills training, we aren't able to model a skill for a parent. We just kind of have to talk them through it and say, yep, that was right, that was wrong, or show them, maybe at the clinic how we would do it. But that is one big issue. So an article outlined by Brand et al. In 2017 talks about the importance of treatment integrity with a focus on discrete trial training. As to be expected, treatment fidelity shows to be an essential component for accurate and the quickest learning for children. It also shows for accurate data when we want to see if the child's met a skill criteria. With that, some pros of telehealth with treatment fidelity are in a study conducted by Powell in 2014 showed that with proper training via a behavior analyst or learning modules accompanied by a behavior analyst, parents were able to show maintained or increased understanding of basic basic principles of ABA. And the photos on the next slide. So what we can see is the lighter gray line was their like pre-assessment of how well they knew ABA. And then the dark gray is after they took these trainings and did these modules, where they fell with their knowledge of ABA. So if you go back, Molly. Another pro is there's just less individuals running ABA. So in a study conducted by BOVA in 2017 as well, it outlines the increase of number of individuals running a given program can show a greater increase in drift and like treatment drift, and in treatment integrity. So basically what that means is if we have 5 or 6 people running a program, we can see a greater likelihood of drift of the implementation of the treatment versus it's just mom and dad are running it.
Megan, did you read any research or do you have any idea if there's any issue with clients having trouble generalizing to other people than that caregiver if they are pretty much only receiving services from that caregiver, if that makes sense?
No, it makes sense. I didn't read anything, but it is something I thought about when I was making this. It's really cool that, kids are learning from their parents, people they're going to have the most exposure with, but they're not going to be able, like some kids might not be able to generalize those instructions to teachers, to, other community helpers. I didn't read any research on it, but it'd be interesting to definitely look at something.
My first article said it does say that it does promote generalization and maintenance when you do have like parent training.
It's interesting. I wonder if it's like because it is in the natural environment with the natural, I don't know, there's just
and like if your mom's doing it and then some random stranger does it, you're like, oh, okay, I know what this is about, that's what I would think.
I heard one of my supervisors had told me a story of, this kid had only gotten instructional control from their mom and their house actually ended up catching on fire. And so they were telling this kid, like, come out of the house. And they didn't listen to it. Unfortunately, they both passed in this fire. And so it would be interesting to see, depending on the kid or the environment, like who listens to what, or is that something we really need to target?
I just feel like generalization is such a huge, issue and something that we take into account, especially if we're teaching the telehealth and just teaching it with parents. I don't know. I just think generalization is a huge core.
Yeah, especially
something we really need to focus on.
Yeah. I mean, even like in-person services, it's really challenging to like promote generalization. Yeah.
So moving on, some of the cons I had felt were Feelings of disconnect. So a study that was run, or more so a survey that was given to parents, or I'm sorry, people that have taken educational courses online. The study was run by Capracci in 2017. And the photos on the next slide, they have these feelings of disconnect from the course content and the instructor. So one question that popped up is this going to be the same for people that are doing ABA over Zoom? So in the second visual, you can see there's just different expectations for the learners, the different expectations for the instructor, and then also your content is going to be different when it takes place online rather than in person. If you go back, Molly, the second con I found was there was not a whole lot of research on how we're tracking IOA, how we're tracking generalization. And then also if the BCBA isn't present, like how are we withholding that treatment fidelity? One issue I could see arising is parents being 100% on their game when the BCBA is there. And then once the laptop is closed, are we withholding that, across the whole day with these kiddos? Lastly, I have a survey conducted by Grindle et al. In 2008 showed that parents may have feelings of wanting to give up, not seeing progress in their child, and also feelings of guilt and that they're dedicating one time or more time to their child that needs ABA services rather than other children. And so when parents are asked to do all of these things on top of you just be parents and live a normal life and go to work, it can just be very emotionally and exhausting, at the end of the day.
Mhm.
So,
Especially because also like when it's your own, if you're trying to do like an extinction thing and it's your own child crying and crying, it's like only natural to
That'd be
not like
so
just
much
give
harder.
in, as opposed to
Mhm.
like you working with somebody else's client. That's what I've come
Yeah,
across.
ABA providers can go home. Parents
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yes.
true.
Okay.
That's
So next, Taylor will be talking about telehealth sessions versus in-person sessions.
So in a systematic literature review of telehealth services by Tomlinson, Gore, and McGill in 2018, it was found that telehealth was effective for clients running an age from 3 to 28 years old, very similar to in-person services. It works with a variety of ages. And then it's also been found effective in teaching skills, some that are traditionally taught in person, such as social skills, early learning repertoire skills, and independent adaptive behavior skills. Next, reinforcement. So due to just the novelty of telehealth in our field, there's truly not that much research out there on much, especially reinforcement with children. I think one, it's really challenging to track over services like Zoom, especially when a parent or a caregiver is implementing it. It's not the service provider implementing the reinforcement. But there is some research on what parents have found reinforcing or not reinforcing about telehealth. So Marino and et al. In 2020 reported that parents in their telehealth group, they had two groups in this experiment. It was a telehealth group and then an in-person control group. The telehealth group demonstrated high levels of interest in being a part of the telehealth group, both before and after the experiment, which just shows the level of satisfaction that the parents had with telehealth matched their expectations going in, which is pretty cool. And so some more information on that is parents, again, wanted to be part of telehealth regardless of any prior experience with it. And then the telehealth group showed 7% lower scores on the parental stress test than the control group. So parents were less stressed out when they were doing telehealth compared to in-person. The telehealth group was also found to be 20% more effective and was performed in less time than the control group. This can be factors like drive time and just the limited hours that a clinic has versus on telehealth, it's a lot more flexible. It can be at 7 at night because people are at home or they don't need to be in the same location in order to have these services. And then parents reported that telehealth was much easier to fit into their lifestyle for these reasons. Again, they don't have to drive their kid. They're the one working with their kid. They're seeing the progress firsthand. They're experiencing the progress firsthand as well.
How did they measure that the telehealth group was more effective? Was it just based on how much they got done during a
It was
session?
based on acquisition rates, compared to like the number of sessions required to gain whatever skills they did. And so,
That
yeah,
makes
I was honestly surprised to see that not only was telehealth more effective, but in less time, which I mean,
Yes.
that sounds better to everyone, providers, parents, clients,
Did you find anything on, I know you mentioned that telehealth can teach social skills. Did you find any articles that went over how they taught that?
I didn't find anything like specifically on it. I'm gonna assume it's somewhat of a group Zoom where there's one practitioner that's basically like running
Right.
the group kind of thing. And then, because obviously social skills, you need to have a certain level of skills and have a certain functioning level in order to be successful at all. And so I think there's certain qualifications that you also need to meet in order to be able to do telehealth social skills. Because I agree, I thought the same thing of social skills are social. Like, how do you do that alone with a computer?
Right.
Kind of thing. But I also wonder if part of it, if maybe it's like more successful or as successful because there's less distraction. Like I know when I've been a part of social skills group, kids are distracted by what the other kids' shoes are wearing or what noise they're making or if they're looking the wrong way or anything like that. So, I mean, a screen takes a little bit away from that because you can only see from the shoulders up.
Yeah.
I think one hard thing with that is like kids learn so much through play though, that you'd have to like dedicate so much time to finding things online that they could play, you know?
Right.
This is my final. I'm in the recording. Sorry. Thomason, Gore, and McGill in 2018 found that clients transitioning from in-person services to telehealth maintained or improved upon acquisition rates by 10%, and that only 7% of the participants declined in acquisition rates. Everyone else either increased or maintained. If you can go to the next slide, Molly, thank you. So attending is another issue that I expected to be a really big barrier in telehealth. I thought looking at a computer screen is really challenging for kids when it's not playing a video they like or on a website that they enjoy. But it was reported that parents and telehealth conductors, so not even just parents, BCBA and RBTs are also observing this, that the technology aspect of telehealth doesn't influence parent-child interactions in any way. It wasn't a distraction. It wasn't something that limited their learning or their ability to learn. And then following up with that, tech issues. Again, I don't have a ton of details on exactly like socioeconomic status, where they're located or anything like that, but any tech issues found in the study done by Tomlinson, McGill, Gore in 2018 were reported to be quickly and easily fixed. They didn't really cause any rips in the session. They didn't disrupt sessions or anything like that. And it was easy to fix from both sides too, not just like the parents or the practitioner.
Yes, I'm sure that has to be part of like their intake process is like, okay, how good is your internet? What can we do to improve your internet or make sure that our sessions move fluently?
For sure. And I mean, like computer is a foreign language to me, as I'm sure it is everyone else too. So again, it's reinforcing to read things like that because I assumed the opposite. And then hours of service. As I stated before, Marion et al. 2020 found that telehealth was more effective than in-person sessions, as well as requiring less hours to be effective. And if you go to the next slide, Molly, I have a couple visuals. So this first one is from a study by Pollard, LeBlanc, Griffin, and Baker in 2020. They're the ones studying the transition from in-person sessions to telehealth sessions being implemented by the caregiver. And as you can see, the rates of correct responding improved or maintained at all levels. Transitioning from just with a technician in person to transitioning to a technician via telehealth to where caregiver is assisted by a technician via telehealth to where the caregiver is able to implement on their own. As you can see, it maintains very high levels of acquisition. Okay, this is from the same study. And then you can see during all phases, service outcomes were improved by over 25%. So you can see how much improvement there is on already the same. It's almost 50% improvement, which is pretty crazy.
Okay, now next, Lanisa will be talking about ethical concerns.
So ethical concerns for telehealth. So a lot of the research surrounding these areas dealt with having the most effective treatments and the satisfaction of the services provided. Looking at location and training, obviously all of it was done via telehealth using a webcam, which we just would want to always make sure that we're aware of our surroundings. So a lot of the articles found referenced where are the services actually being conducted. And as I was thinking about this, wondering if you're the place where you work, maybe they might define that in more detail if you're using telehealth, where you're allowed to go and where you're allowed to have these services. But let's say there's nothing in place and you are a BCBA and your internet runs out and you choose not to cancel your session, you go to a coffee shop, you're having your session via telehealth, and that just could make a rise in ethical concerns, as you could be, saying their name out loud, or someone walks by and sees them on the screen and they know them. Like, a lot of ethical concerns could come up with that.
Yeah, Lanisa, I also think of being on like an open network, of being like, have you found any research on like if there's any HIPAA or any sort of requirements on being a private network that there's a less likelihood that it's going to be hacked and this information is going to be leaked because it is confidential,
Yeah, and I found some things on HIPAA, but not as much as I would think. But with that being said, I mean, then we should consider, is telehealth the most effective treatment we can provide? We should always be looking back at our code of ethics. And so for the new code of ethics, I'm going to be referencing the new code, and 2.01 is providing effective treatment. So behavior analysts prioritize clients' rights and needs in service delivery. Rodriguez in 2020 did mention how telehealth is not for everyone and it may not be effective for some clients. And then another study done by Fisher 2020 showed that ABA training and early intervention did have better outcomes in person versus electronically for clients, which seems to be kind of a different study that I had found versus yours, Taylor, which is interesting. But when researching this topic, it is still important to know that things are new. It's a new topic to the field and a lot more research does need to be done. And Rodriguez, to continue, he also mentioned that ABA is effective when you are trained in the area of competence. So it was interesting to read about this because we are asking a lot of the parents and we're asking them to implement things that maybe typically they're not essentially trained on right away. So I think it's just important to always keep this in mind as we could go down an ethical issues with having them not being trained in certain areas, and maybe they might not be providing the most effective treatments. So on the next slide, this was kind of his guide for providing RBTs and BCBAs, like a checklist, like maybe use this and see if your learner could have difficulties learning with telehealth, or if, like, what are the areas of deficits that needs to be addressed. So they kind of go over, you need to ask the caregiver to provide lots of redirections. They need to be trained on prompting, reinforcement, strategies, different schedules, lots of things in order to be successful on telehealth. So another concern would be family satisfaction with services. So code 2.19 addresses conditions interfering with service delivery. We would just want to make sure we continue to monitor this, as we do appreciate the involvement of the family, and we should also be looking at the environmental conditions, interfering situations, and items preventing this service delivery. Noting all of these factors will help us tie in, is this the best treatment we can have for the learner and the family? And we want the family to be on board and to feel comfortable running all of the programs and treatment plans we have in place. And then lastly, there was HIPAA concerns and violations, which I didn't find a ton of research on. However, just to make sure you're using HIPAA compliant software and be aware of hacking potential whenever you're on telehealth or any type of technology or software that you're using. And then I had found an article that did suggest help in sharing telehealth treatments across BCBAs. as this is kind of still new to our field. And Matson 2020 just make sure to suggest that your slides are protected and that your data and info is always deleted before sharing, which it could be very easy to make a slip up and make a mistake or save the wrong file and send it. And then that just is another big ethical concern to have. And then, so cultural and socioeconomic factors surrounding telehealth. So one thing to look at would be training and supervision needed for telehealth. Something that you guys kind of touched on was, we're no longer asking families to have an hour of family guidance. Now it's maybe more 15, 30 hours that we need them for, as we can't be there physically. So now we need the parent to act as if they are us. So we need them for reinforcement, prompting, all of these things. And some families might not be able to have that availability or take work off like that, as they might not have the finances available to do so. Telehealth can serve families that are not able to get services due to cost and location, as Blackman has stated, but it is almost more intensive for the family. And if you could go to the next slide. Blackman had conducted a study on this as well, comparing in vivo versus online. And so parental interaction is lower in vivo, higher online, knowledge assessment, higher in vivo and lower online, which is something we wouldn't want to see. We would want to see that their knowledge is increasing, hopefully, because essentially you would want to end services and have families take over. So it was just an interesting piece, but I do think there's a lot more research needed.
Yes. Okay, so finally, our question and answer. How does parent involvement affect the delivery of ABA services? According to Fisher and colleagues in 2020, parental involvement plays a crucial role and can maximize the potential benefits of early intensive behavioral intervention. Some important elements of implementing ABA that would make it difficult to train parents via telehealth are role-playing skills, collecting data, and monitoring implementation fidelity. About how many hours of parent training is required for providing services via telehealth to maintain high treatment fidelity? According to Neely et al. In 2017, about 5.5 hours of online modules and 8.5 hours of video conferencing is necessary for parents. Some disadvantages to only providing ABA services via telehealth are children who need physical guidance, a lack of attending in children, and limited access to high-speed internet. Some skills that have shown to be effectively taught in ABA services via telehealth are functional communication training, social skills, and skills taught through discrete trial instruction. Some important ethical considerations that should be made when providing services via telehealth are a family's culture, safety, informed consent, and reliance on scientific evidence for using telehealth. And finally, some cultural considerations that must be made before providing services are challenges faced by rural communities, language barriers, and economic stress. And there's our sources. Thank you for coming to our presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.